Hello everybody, Carolina Tony coming to you today from Maggie Valley, North Carolina at the Wheels Through Time Museum. This motorcycle here is a 1962 Traub. Now, you've probably never heard of this motorcycle before, and there's a reason for it. This motorcycle was found in a wall in Chicago, and if it hadn't been walled up in Chicago, this could have very well been the #1 motorcycle in the country today. It's seen in Harley Davidson. And we're going to listen to this story right after the station identification.
Medallion. Now, these two people, they come from Chicago, and I've been told there's a north side and a south side, mainly for baseball. But this actual motorcycle here, I will guarantee, will, if you Google it, come up as the world's rarest motorcycle. Why? This motorcycle in 1967 would be found in a wall in Chicago. Now, the apartment owner had owned his apartment for not that long. He's decided he's going to do some renovation work. He goes upstairs, measuring the length of his upstairs by the width of his upstairs. He times it by 4, he's got his square footage to put new flooring in. However, on coming downstairs, this is when he would realise that downstairs was 2.5 foot shorter in length than the upstairs. Now, some people say it was the plumber, some people say it was a fireman who was actually dismantling the building, but we just basically say that he was putting new flooring in, because he will get his trusty torch, he will get a hammer, and carefully, after studying the 2 downstairs walls, he would knock a couple of bricks from one of the walls, seeing a secret cavity. Knocking a few more bricks out and illuminating, he sees this actual motorcycle in this original condition, except at that stage it was covered up in a dust sheet and it was covered in dust and muck. Now, the apartment owner has no fear about knocking the whole wall down, because he knows anything that's in his apartment belongs to him. So he will make sure that not too many bricks land on whatever was underneath the dust sheet. However, on dragging it out, he realises for the first time that he's actually got a motorbike. Now, there's a problem. He has got no knowledge of motorbikes, and he's got no real interest in motorbikes, but he knows it must be worth something. So he chooses to go to the expert of motorcycling in North Carolina Street, and this is the local Yamaha dealer, explaining, "I've just found a motorbike in the wall. Can you come up and have a look?" Now, the Yamaha dealer is an expert of American motorcycles, and on coming up realises, with all his expertise, he's never heard of a bike called Traub, and more important, when he studies this engine, he realises he's never seen an engine quite like this. Now, at this stage, the Yamaha dealer starts to suspect that it could be one of those missing links, the link between the motor bicycle with pedals and a motorbike with a kickstart. So the Yamaha dealer goes into a negotiation. He will point out that this bike has got no headlight, no tail light, and of course at that stage covered in dust and muck, the bike is unfit and unsafe to be used on the road. But I, as a responsible Yamaha dealer, am willing to swap a brand new bike for this. The apartment owner, as I said, no real interest and no real knowledge of motorbikes. He would realise he's got a brick wall down, a terrible mess, and a bike unfit and unsafe for the road. He would actually take that swap and end up with a brand new 350 Yamaha in blue. Now, the Yamaha dealer takes this down, clears his front window, puts the bike there, along with it a small little plaque saying, "Found in the wall, Chicago, 1967. Over the next 8 to 10 years, people start talking about the bike. Eventually the media will start writing about it, and it will be in the late 1970s when a gentleman called Bud Eakin will come in and buy this motorcycle sight unseen. Now, if you've had a telly in the last 50 years or so, you definitely would have seen some of Bud Eakin's work. But are we aware who he is? No. And yet, Bud Eakin has probably inspired every single one of us, because not only is Bud Eakin one of the world's top motocross enduro and desert racers, he's a close personal friend, riding companion, and stuntman to a gentleman called Steve McQueen. You've heard of him? Yeah. You may be aware that in 1961, Steve McQueen makes a film called The Great Escape. It would be Bud Eakin that would go over with his good friend, and the pair of them would create this chase where Captain Schultz on that Tribe motorcycle, being chased by the German army, across southern Germany will culminate in that famous jump over the barbed wire fence where Bud Ekin jumps for his good friend Steve McQueen. Now this wasn't because Steve McQueen couldn't do the jump, it was because he couldn't get insured to do the jumps. For the self-same reason, in 1968 you will see Bud Ekin at the steering wheel of that famous green Mustang in Bullet. Steve McQueen couldn't get insured. Now Bud Ekin is up in Chicago making yet another film, The Blues Brothers. He hears about this motorcycle that was found in the wall in Chicago. He rings his close personal friend up, and there's famous pictures of Bud Ekin and Steve McQueen going to Cirillo Tacci's Yamaha dealership in North Paulina Street, where they would purchase this bike sight on scene. Now we don't know if it doesn't take the backing of his good friend Steve McQueen, because by now the price has started to escalate, and more important, this bike would actually end up in Steve McQueen's collection in his twilight years of his life until he passed away in 1980. Now the pair of them are not just historians, they're also caretakers of American history. So we don't believe anything other than making sure there was air in the tyre, fuel in the tank, and of course oil in the engine was done by them. But they would choose to call it all the proper experts. Not just the experts from America, these are the experts from around the world. Come and see the bike that was found in the wall in Chicago. The experts would go through this bike with a fine-tooth comb, realising every single part of this motorcycle, with the exception of 5 individual parts. Every other part has been designed, manufactured, machined, put together and made running by a person we know as Mr. Traub. The 5 exceptions was the only way that the experts could actually age this motorcycle. They were the seat, the carburettor, the magneto and the 2 wheels. And because of them 5 items, it would be the experts, not us, that would give this bike a year of manufacture of 1916. The interesting thing is though, in 1916, Mr. Traub had designed possibly one of the world's earliest 80 cubic inch 3-speed transmission kickstart operated motorcycles. But more important, this motorcycle is 21 years ahead of Harley Davidson's 80 cubic inch and light years ahead of India. The American male psyche of a bigger, better, faster bike, if this bike had actually gone into production in 1916, as opposed to being hidden in the wall, the likelihood is it probably would have put Harley Davidson and Indian out of business during the Depression. Google this bike, I will guarantee it will come up as the world's rarest motorcycle. But all we honestly know, it was found in the wall in Chicago. Any questions? Traub is a very common German Jewish name, very similar to Smith and Jones. But when you start isolating master craftsmen, machinists, experimental machinists or designers, you will see that there's like a Ulysses Traub, a Godlet Traub, a Richard Traub, Frederick Traub, Frank Traub. And all these people were capable of building this motorcycle. And so the interesting thing is, what we see now is with the use of the internet, people like yourselves will go home, some of them by the name of Traub, and they would do their own delving. And of course they would put it into public demand, or into the public domain. And so the first information that we ever get of possibly the man that built this motorcycle is 1907. Now in 1907 at the Motorcycle Illustrated magazine, you will see that this man has made a homemade motorcycle. This July of 1907. They would then seal it and sign it so that There's this tantalisingly out of focus picture, but you can see when you don't look now, but when in a minute, have a look, the handlebars, the cut of the tank, and under the name homemade motorcycle, you can actually see it's not this bike. But to confirm it, he actually gives you the weights, the dimensions, the wheelbase. The interesting fact is, this letter was written by a Richard Trout, T-R-A-U-T as opposed to T-R-A-U-B. And Richard Trout comes from 749 North Paulina Street, Chicago, Illinois. The exact same road where this motorcycle was found in the wall. Now the next letter is actually to the same magazine. And it has come in 1910, so this is 3 years after this one. You will see, there's no date, but believe me, it's 1910. But a man is asking about a large capacity motorcycle, what precautions should I take to prevent hydraulicking, which is a build-up of oil pressure in the engine, and what magneto would you recommend? The magazine would say, build a series of baffles over the rear cylinder with a number of holes, which is exactly what is done here, and put a three-way breather, which is here, and use a Bosch magneto. The interesting thing is, this 1910 letter comes from a Richard Trobb of Chicago. Now, 3 weeks ago, information came to light that wasn't actually anything to do with this motorbike, but Matt and another gentleman would suddenly connect it, and it was one of them hey presto moments. From 1907, when this first letter was printed, to 1914, when this Lansdowne Fire Insurance map came out, you will see North Paulina Street had actually been renumbered. Now, unbeknown to anyone until 3 weeks ago, we always been searching at 749 North Paulina Street, which is where this first letter came, and couldn't make any connection. But now we can see we should have been looking at 1520 North Paulina Street, which is exactly 749, but they renumbered it. If we'd seen there, you would see the apartment where possibly the motorcycle was found. A small porch, and then at the back of the apartment is a machine shop. Now this machine shop actually faces Pierce Street. Now, if we looked at Pierce Street, you will notice the architecture on the house next door to it, which is actually 1713 Pierce Street, has got a very prominent cutout. The brickwork is obvious, and it's marked on these two buildings. Now, December last year, Matt would turn around and say, Andy, that's me. Have you seen the Richard Trobb motorcycle shop? Address unknown, date unknown. And I said, no, never. And so Matt said, my dad's got it up at the house. He's had it for about 20 years. He goes up there with his mobile phone, takes a picture, brings it down. Last year in December, another one of these hey presto moments. Because this is actual photograph, and you will notice that it is a Richard Trobb motorcycle shop with 3 motorbikes outside. For the first time, as we splay the picture open, we will see the long handlebars, the couple of petrol tank. This actual motorcycle is the motorbike in the middle. So that now connects Richard Trout to Richard Trobb. We will also see the architecture of the house next door to it is the same architecture that is on this map here. Now, you may be aware that there's this great new invention from England. It's called Google Map Earths. You can actually come down from the satellite, which is probably made in England as well, and you will see as it comes down that you will actually get to North Paulina Street. Nip around the corner into Pierce Street, you can actually see the architecture here of this motorcycle. When you see this shop here, it's been completely knocked down, and there's a 2-bay garage. Now, what does this prove? This proves now that we can go, well, 3 weeks ago, we went back into the archives. We went to North Paulina Street, 749 North Paulina Street in 1910. We will see Godlet R. Trout, head of the household. He was 24 years old, probably the eldest male in the family, because of course we know that females were always second class at that time. And we will realise that probably his father had passed away. His younger brother would be Frederick Trout. By 1920, 10 years later, but now looking at 1520 North Paulina Street, which is exactly the same house, you see that Richard Trobb is the head of the household at 34 years old, and his younger brother was called Frank. 4 of the original Trobbs we were searching for was actually 2 brothers. Now, what happened between 1910 and 1920? The First World War. Anti-German feeling was running very, very high. In 1914, when Britain, Australia, Canada, and the rest of the Commonwealth declared war on Germany, your country would start building arms, ammunition, and they would be sending it over to Europe for Australia, Canada, Britain, and all the rest. In 1917, due to the sinking of the Lusitania, due to the sinking of other ocean liners, innocent ocean liners, and of course because of the basically the rape of Belgium, your country would declare war on Germany. The Germans never imagined that you would actually declare war on them. You had an army of 150,000 men within 2 months. 2 million men are armed, equipped, and are on the way to Europe. Brass for casings, steel for rifles, aluminium was in very, very, very short supply. Now, 2 young brothers felt so concerned that they took their German names away and they started calling themselves more American, Richard and Frank. And so you would probably see that because of the anti-German feeling in America, that may well have been the reason why they hid this motorcycle in the wall. Because within a very short period of time, you will see the FBI, the CIA, and of course other police enforcement agencies coming down, checking on the machine shop, making sure that they're not doing anything untowards. And it would only take one man in that policeman's family to have been murdered or shot in Europe for them to come in and see this invention and say, I'm confiscating it, I'm melting it down. So they may well have actually hid this bike in the wall. Telling this story, I personally believe the motorcycle was actually hidden in the engineering shop. Why? My theory is, you've got your mum living at home, you've got your sisters living at home, you've got your brothers living at home. Could you honestly risk hiding this in the apartment where all them people are living, and a smart-eyed FBI agent coming in to check suddenly sees that the wall has been changed, knocks a brick out, everyone in that household is now guilty. But by leaving it in the machine shop, you could make a mess, you could build it up, that wall up in a couple of days, and if anyone is caught, there's only one person's name over the shop, and that is Richard Trobb, and he would take the responsibility of hiding this, and it would possibly have been classed as espionage, possibly a hanging offence. But it was probably 1967, when they were probably knocking down this machine shop, that they would probably find this motorcycle in the wall. Again, that's another complete and utter speculation, but it just, to me, makes sense. And so this motorcycle is the world's rarest motorbike. Now, Richard would work in the machine shop, but Frank worked for Aurora Engineering. Aurora Engineering in 1901 would be building the very early Indian engines until the Springfield factory got up and running. Harley Davidson would use Aurora Engineering. Henderson would use Aurora Engineering. And of course, you will see Excelsior using Aurora Engineering. It was a massive factory, and of course, Richard would probably have silver soldered this syringe together, and he would have probably said to his younger brother Frank, "Here, Frank, when you dip into work tomorrow, put this in your lunchbox. Ask the nickel platers, could you nickel plate it? And if they need anything doing with their sewing machine, their car, their motorbike, or anything else, come and see me." And this possibly would be how this bike was made. Does anyone know what this is for? It's actually primer. You would draw petrol from the petrol tank and then cold Chicago burners, and just put a couple of drops in each of these, open the stop valve, and this would allow neat fuel to run into the engine. Now, we're told why I think this bike was put in the wall. Why did he never collect it? Because we know Richard Trobb lived till 1954. Possibly you will see by the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, peace, on Earth. And
because of the need for metal and brass during the war, perhaps that's why the brothers hid it behind a wall. Well, the story of the Trobb motorcycle, or Trout, truly amazing. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you hadn't subscribed to my channel, be sure to go down here and click subscribe. After that, ring the bell so you'll be notified every time we put a video out. But for now, y'all have a good day.